Greetings, and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is the M.A.P, the Modern Alchemist Podcast. Today on the M.A.P, we'll be discussing Astrotheology, what it is, and how it differs from ordinary or standard theology. Ready? Let's begin.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Over the course of the last 2 years, I've presented a variety of concepts and information in a dozen different formats, all in an effort to demonstrate a singular concept: that the study of alchemy is broad-reaching, covering a vast variety of topics and subjects, and that the study of alchemy will inevitably lead one to the study of astrotheology and its attendant myths and narratives. The reason for this is simple. The core mandate of alchemy is temet nose, to know oneself. And a component of this within the realm of the esoteric is to decipher the various myths, legends, and sacred writings from a perennial standpoint. Some might argue against this, but my immediate reply calls to the attention that the study of alchemy is also the study of astrology, palmistry, the tarot, and of course the Kabbalah. And as anyone practiced in the study of these esoteric arts knows, within them is clear reference to the astrotheological narrative at the very least, and definitive clues to its decryption as a certainty. It is my experience that the study of astrotheology is important because these stories are our stories, and that they are relevant and revelatory as to our own nature, our narrative. Furthermore, as one becomes familiar with astrotheology, one discovers that these stories have been preserved and retold in hundreds of different formats and in hundreds of different voices, regardless of race, nationality, or creed, all of which has continued without a break or pause to this day. Of course, there are those who would suggest that this is some vast conspiracy, and at one time I might have agreed. Now, however, I see that this has much less to do with conspiracy and more to do with simply paying attention, observing without prejudice, and knowing for what to look. If there is a conspiracy afoot, it is that the general public, for one reason or another, remains undereducated relative to the significance of this material. Again, one could suggest that this is a conspiracy to keep people in ignorance, but after much thought and consideration in the matter, and a great deal of experience as an educator of this material, most people don't know because they simply don't care to know. After all, ignorance can be bliss, and learning this material can be very hard and yet very rewarding work. To begin our discussion, we should probably discuss the differences between astrotheology and ordinary or standard theology. The shortest answer that I have often shared with students over the years is this: where the theologian is trying to sell you something, the astrotheologian is trying to tell you something. Having spent 20 years of my life as one of the local theologians within my religious community, the vast number of my assignments being that of an educator of the adult membership, I know that this statement to be true by virtue of the fact that theology deals with the doctrines and covenants of a particular religion, and astrotheology does not. Where a theologian is concerned with understanding the mind and intent of God and conveying this to their peers or parish, the astrotheologian is concerned with deciphering what the gods were doing and the impact of that narrative. Where theology requires faith, astrotheology requires concrete knowledge and understanding. Because the theologian is faith-driven, their faith requires adherence to some form of personal conduct. Astrotheology makes no such demands upon its students. Additionally, theologians are often restricted in the materials that are available to them or to the body of the members of their particular faith. For instance, Christians use only the Bible, Jews the Tanakh, and the people of Islam the Quran. By contrast, astrotheologians avail themselves of any and every possible narrative, any scripture, any myth or sacred writing, regardless of race, creed, or religious belief. Thus, where astrotheology assumes a perennial perspective, theology is very ethnocentric. However, the differences do not end there. For where theologians will endeavor to explain concepts of good and evil and apply these very subjective definitions to the universe at large, the astrotheologian avoids such foolishness and seeks only to expand their understanding with what can be known or understood, looking always for a physical explanation, something tangible and definitive. Furthermore, where theology would condemn the practice or pursuit of the esoteric arts, astrotheology relies upon these arts and ancient tools as a method to decipher the actions and activities of the divine as contained within sacred writings, sculpture, music, books, or theater. Finally, where the use of actual science is often considered unnecessary or even shunned within the theological community in general, astrotheologians seek out scientific understanding as a means of expressing the actual events illustrated within scriptural or mythological narrative, and framing those narratives into concrete terms. Thus, where a theologian might literally interpret beings like Lucifer, Satan, or the devil, and suggest that their reality is physical, tangible, and interactive, astrotheologians recognize that the presentation of these mythological beings are actually personifications of greater celestial objects, and that their villainization is largely a subjective interpretation of the activities of these celestial bodies relative to their conduct, as observed by various communities of humanity. How does this relate to the study and practice of alchemy? Well, we need only return to its mandate of temet nose, know yourself, to discover our answer. Both theologians and astrotheologians believe that coming to terms with our origin story as a human race is of paramount importance to the individual seeking some form of personal ascension. However, where the theologian will place human conduct at the center of these narratives and suggest that all humanity shoulder the blame for events of an eternal nature, like the fall of man, for instance, astrotheologians place no such burden upon the shoulders of mankind, knowing this to be a misrepresentation of scriptural or mythological narratives in question. So now that you have a sense of the difference in focus between astrotheology and theology, let's get right to business and explore astrotheology in practical terms. Regardless of the knowledge or skill level within the realm of astrotheology, the first tool that is ever at the disposal of the astrotheologian comes from the words of Marcus Aurelius, wherein he counsels, "Of each particular thing, ask, what is it in itself, its own constitution?" In other words, of what is it composed? What is its nature? What does it do? And how do those actions define what it is? Paired with this admonition is one of my own, which is simply this: no shoehorning. Meaning, if you can't easily slip the girl's foot into the glass slipper, it's not Cinderella. These two ideas combined will fortify the novice or the adept and yield much fruit as the astrotheologian seeks to unmask the gods and reveal their true face. Finally, if the astrotheologian truly desires to hit the metaphorical pay dirt as a result of their endeavors, the astrotheologian must cast aside all prejudice, all ethnocentric bias, and seek to understand the various myths and legends in the terms our collective ancestors understood them. To do this, one final mental adjustment is required. The astrotheologian must concede that our collective ancestors saw the world from a dramatically different perspective than from where we view the world today. One must also concede that it is more than likely that our collective ancestors were more intelligent than we are today, and that their view of the universe endured over the course of thousands of years, not due to religious oppression, but due to the success it had in describing the overall human experience. The astro in astrotheology is a not-so-subtle clue that astrotheology has something to do with the stars, and as such, calls to attention the study of astrology and astronomy. But where astrology is often used for the purpose of prognostication, astrotheology has no such interests. Instead, the area wherein the two intertwine and intersect lay within the planetary and stellar associations relative to the study of astrology. and the core of those narratives. Meaning, the astrotheologian may be less concerned with where a planet has been or is going than the cognitive and historical associations relative to the planets and the course of their transit. Each planet then becomes an actor within the great cosmic play, assuming their roles and their many faces associated with their dominion or their bailiwick. And so, to the astrotheologian, there are 7 brides for 7 brothers, each one of them associated with the 7 astrological planets and their respective hemispheres, the northern hemisphere being aspected feminine receptive, and the southern hemisphere being aspected masculine projective. This knowledge then explains the mythological conundrum of the infertile or sexually unproductive husband-wife-brother-sister combination seen throughout mythology. When the two are combined in this way, we see a singular planet generally named after its dominant gender characteristic. One discovers that the previous confusion, debauchery, and tumult seen within every mythological record is a description of the interaction of these 7 bodies with 14 faces, masculine and feminine, bearing 1,000 different names over the course of ancient human history depending upon their activity or relationship with the other gods or planets. Furthermore, we learn that their heroic or villainous behavior has more to do with the perspective of the narrator and less to do with a complete reflection of the event or events in question. From the standpoint of an astrotheologian, every story is only half true, as that it reflects the bias of the narrator. Thus, one man's heroic god is another man's devil. Only through a complete study of all available narratives can the actual events in question be deciphered. And this is the goal of every astrotheologian, to Scooby-Doo the gods and goddesses of mythological or scriptural record to reveal the face of the planetary aspect they truly represent. This accomplished, what comes next? Well, next comes the science. Once the mythological record has been deciphered and the planetary body in question has been assigned to the mythological hero or god within the myth or legend in question, the work of the astrotheologian has only just begun. Now comes the work of describing the myth in terms of what is actually happening relative to planetary motion or interaction. Sadly, standard model planetary physics leaves the astrotheologian in the lurch, because the narrative and cosmology of the standard model can provide no light where mythology is concerned. To unravel this mystery, one must adopt the cosmology of our collective ancestors, a cosmology that even today is well known and understood among the community of the esoteric, that the universe is electric. This simple truth avails the astrotheologian with vast correspondences of scientific data and understanding which can easily be applied to decrypting what the gods or the planets were doing and how the world changed as a result of their interaction. This is the core of what astrotheology is all about, to unveil the story that has been hidden in plain sight before our eyes for thousands of years. When this narrative is understood in full, the astrotheologian discovers a definitive liberation has taken place within themselves through the course of their study. This process enables one to understand oneself and one's essential nature, as well as many of the hows and whys behind life's many mysteries. But discoveries such as these are only possible when one realizes that the myth or legend that has been preserved over the course of thousands of years conceals within itself a greater scientific principle, knowledge, or understanding, and that the myth or legend in question was designed to preserve these principles or concepts over the course of human history. This is what astrotheology is all about, at least in brief. Its study is implied through the course of any esoteric pursuit, and to the serious student of alchemy, it is essential. Thank you for joining me today on the M.A.P, the Modern Alchemist Podcast, in our brief discussion of astrotheology. If you'd like me to discuss this topic in greater detail in a future episode of the M.A.P, perhaps providing a more lengthy discussion or actual decryption of a given pantheon or described mythological event, feel free to leave me a comment in the comments section below, or you can write to me at the Modern Alchemist channel at gmail.com. This is a difficult area of study, only because most are unfamiliar with assuming an interdisciplinary approach to this material, requiring a grounded understanding of mythology, archaeology, and anthropology, as well as a corresponding understanding of the principles, functions, and physics of the electric universe. The truth is that if one expects to become the master of the art, one must draw upon the wisdom of Paul the Apostle within 1 Corinthians 13:11, wherein he says, "When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me." Learning this material requires dedication, time, and study, without which the student is doomed to failure. It must be approached with maturity and a genuine desire to uncover the actual narrative behind the story. In so doing, the astrotheologian will discover within themselves a change taking place, similar to that described by the prophet Malachi. For they will discover their hearts have been turned to their ancient parents, revealing that the hearts of our collective ancestors have ever been turned towards us in the most amazing way, so that we could know who we are by understanding who they were, and by so doing, be able to see what we may yet become. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is the M.A.P on the Modern Alchemist channel. I'll be talking to you soon.